We are going to now be talking with Rutendo Matinyarare. He's a renowned Zimbabwean anti-sanctions activist, and going to be talking to us about the elections in Zimbabwe. We do know that the people are making their way to the polls this morning, and what are the expectations? Morning to you, Rutendo. Welcome to the program.
To you too, and thank you so much for
Okay.
having me on the show.
A pleasure entirely. We know that Zimbabwe are heading into hotly contested general elections today. We also know that President Mnangagwa has been canvassing to win a second term. We also hear that he's been giving away T-shirts, free chicken meals, loaves of bread, and also all-night concerts, which costs an arm and a leg when millions of people there are starving. How do you view his election campaign? Uh, comparing it with possibly the opposition parties like Chamisa, who is really running his campaign on a shoestring budget.
I'm just a bit surprised by the fact that you start by questioning me on a false narrative. Where are Zimbabweans starving? Why do you say Zimbabweans are starving?
Because that is what I have in my script here, and I'm asking you the question. Please don't be defensive. If that narrative is wrong, you can just correct the narrative.
Yeah, but it's very annoying for you to call me onto radio for a narrative that is wrong and a narrative that is
Well, then
stereotypically
just, or
untrue.
with due
Why?
respect, Rutendo, Rutendo, then correct the narrative, but don't attack me, because I'm trying to engage with you in a very, hopefully in a respectful manner. If the narrative is wrong, then please correct me. That's what interviews are all about, not about attacking each other. And I can
you
hear that
starting off, you're starting off with attacking me. You're
I'm
starting off
not
with an
attacking
anti-Pan
you.
African
No,
perspective.
no, 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 I'm
I'm
not.
attack-
I have apologized, and I'm saying to you, please correct the narrative. If I'm wrong, remember, I also have some paperwork here in front of me, and I'm going according to what was given to me. So all I'm saying to you is correct the narrative. We don't have to fight about this. And with due respect to you, please correct the narrative
okay.
from your
So
point of view,
with Zimbabwe,
obviously from your point of view.
all right. So with the situation in Zimbabwe right now, we have a surplus of maize and a surplus of wheat, and we are exporting wheat and maize to other African countries, Rwanda, for instance, Congo. So we do not have starvation in Zimbabwe. We do not have a food crisis in Zimbabwe. As for the campaigning that is utilizing the giving of food parcels, the giving of T-shirts, and where the money comes from, ZANU-PF is a private organization, and when they actually do their campaigns, they use their private funds that come from their donors. And some of their donors are some of the billionaires that have been put under economic sanctions right now because of things like assisting the government, making sure that the government has got loans, and assisting ZANU-PF by giving in their contributions as members of that party in order to help the party to campaign. Do I support that? Not necessarily, but I understand why it's done. I understand why a private organization would try and market itself and brand itself in a manner that will be able to help it connect with the electorate. It's not necessarily my choice. I think it's a waste of money, it's a waste of resources. Those resources could have been employed better by those private citizens, maybe donating some of that money. But the problem is, we chose a democratic system in Africa that is a Westminster system of these popularity contests every single 5 years that waste a lot of resources only for people to elect a government, people who usually don't even have the skills or knowledge to pick a government or to understand the type of government that they need to pick. So it becomes a popularity contest where resources are being wasted. That is my perspective.
Okay. Also, as part of what I have in front of me, it reads, the headline reads, Zimbabwe heads to elections as it sees some of the world's highest inflation. Is that correct? How are you viewing the inflation situation on the ground? And by the way, Rutendo, are you based in Zimbabwe itself, or are you working from outside of Zimbabwe?
Right. I'm based in Zimbabwe and out of Zimbabwe in South Africa, so I'm between the two countries because of the work that I'm doing. We are currently in court fighting sanctions in the South African courts with the banks that are implementing the sanctions. And on the issue of inflation, you're right. Zimbabwe's got one of the highest inflations in the world. But if you look at the top 15 countries that have got inflation and the highest inflation in the world at the present moment, it's all countries that are under United States illegal sanctions. And Zimbabwe has been under those sanctions for 22 years. Part of what causes that inflation is because of imports that cannot be imported directly. It's about monies that cannot be borrowed directly from banks. So we have to go to third tier level banks or financial institutions to get our loans, which makes them more expensive. When we export our exports, we always have payment systems being blocked by major banks and main banks. So then we have to use secondary banks and secondary finance institutions to make payments for exports, inputs, fertilizers, fuel, and that increases the cost in everything that we do. And it makes us uncompetitive as well as industry and factories, because when we export or when we manufacture, we always have to look for other ways to get to market because of the illegal sanctions. And that's why the United Nations said that the sanctions that are on Zimbabwe are a violation of human rights, if not persecution that is equivalent to crimes against humanity. And so that's why
Okay.
you see the inflation. And that's why the UN is saying sanctions are illegal. Even the Geneva Convention says, even in wartime, you cannot deprive civilians of food, education, healthcare, and exports for them to be economically active because it destroys the economy of a nation. But while that's happening, Zimbabwe has still been able to build infrastructure. Like I told you, it's made itself food self-sufficient. We've had to find ways to circumvent these sanctions. And the cost of circumvention of those sanctions is what you see building up into the inflation that we see. We can also not rule out sabotage by the United States, who are said to put in a lot of US dollars into the economy to try and push this inflation. And also, of course, a lot of Zimbabweans are outside Zimbabwe. They remit a lot of money that goes into construction, that goes into the economy, and causes consumption to increase when the economy is not growing at the same rate. So that causes inflation as well.
Okay, let's look at what you predict the outcome to be. Are the people confident, and will, the current government serve an additional 5 years? Because we're also understanding there's murmurings about the opposition demanding access to the verified voters roll, which according to them, they are saying that election authorities have refused to hand over. What's the story behind that statement?
The statement that they can't get the voters' roll is not correct because it's electronically available. Numbers were given on how you access the voters' roll to all political parties, and it was given yesterday publicly by the government and together with ZEC. So we don't understand why the opposition is saying this. But remember, sanctions in Zimbabwe have always been held in a climate of antagonism, where, first of all, there is these illegal sanctions we spoke about. They were deliberately imposed by the United States to force Zimbabweans to vote for the opposition. I'm not just saying this from my head. When you read the Zidera sanction statement itself, it says that the sanctions are there to help Zimbabweans achieve democratic change, not democracy, not the maintenance of the democratic maintenance of the government that people want, but to achieve democratic change. A study was then done in the United States by a professor called Professor Boyce Park in 2018, where he said that sanctions are there to assist opposition governments against incumbent governments by making the economy melt down to force people to vote for the opposition. And he gave in that particular research the case study of NDC winning elections in Zimbabwe because of this rigging. Now, this is now documented scientific research and it is peer reviewed. But I don't understand why the Zimbabwean government continues to have elections in a country where the opposition uses sanctions and is assisted by Western powers to try and force the Zimbabwean people to vote for the opposition by making them suffer. So I do expect a ZANU-PF victory. Reason being, in the last election, they won by two-thirds majority. Within the past 2 years, we've been having by-elections from that election, and it has actually taken ZANU-PF to 70% of the vote, and that means they've got a supermajority. So with this supermajority, I find it very difficult to believe that the MDC or the CCC or the opposition are going to erode that 70% margin that ZANU-PF has got. But all the same, I still believe that it is an injustice for the Zimbabwean people to be taken to a poll that is unfree, unfair, because of economic weapons and persecution that is being used upon the people to force them to vote for the opposition. But remember, the president of Zimbabwe has been constructing roads. We have just eliminated load shedding to become food self-sufficient because we built a new power plant in Wange. That has been, we've got the biggest steel plant in Africa that's just been built in Zim. That means jobs. We're going to be advancing the railway system. Dams are being built for irrigation so that we can continue farming and producing more. All this has been victories by ZANU-PF that haven't been there for the past 17 years before the current president came in. And I think that's going to make the current president persuade the Zimbabwean people to give him another term. However, now, this is where the crux of the matter is. If the opposition wins with the issue of sanctions I've been telling you, with the fact that the UN has denounced the sanctions, SADC has denounced the sanctions, the AU has denounced the sanctions, will the government of Zimbabwe give over power to the opposition? I can almost guarantee you that they wouldn't, because then they would start citing the sanctions. And so our question is, why didn't they just cancel this opposition that is using sanctions, ask for a tribunal by the Court of Human Rights of Africa, and then eliminate this opposition from the ballot in the same way that Black Land First was eliminated from the South African ballot because they wouldn't accept white people on the ballot. I mean, white people in their party.
Rutendo, you've covered all the bases there. Thank you indeed for being with us on the show this morning. Once again, my apologies if you misunderstood my initial question, but thank you indeed for that overview regarding the situation in Zimbabwe and the fact that the people are going to the polls this morning. Go well, thank you, and God bless.
Thank you so much, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to tell the story. Like you said, give the narrative if my narrative is false. And I apologize if I misunderstood you, and thank you for the opportunity.
No worries at all. We're friends, and I'd like to end it there. Go well. It is exactly 9:32. News and Views on Salam Media. Standing by to talk with us this morning. Our Women in Media is Yasmin Kota, a Tofi founder and director of Covered Official.
Rejuvenating media day by day.